Hello, and welcome back to my Novacore tournament recap. In this round, it's round 2, and we're playing Supplies versus Yu Jing. My opponent in this round would be Jordan from Newcastle. And with the draw against him went the dream of an easy round 2. Jordan and I have played a couple of times in the past, and we have never had what you would call a close, even, or bloodless game. He played against me in round 5 at CanCon 2019, and if you want to imagine how that game went from my perspective, imagine what it is like to be the toddler in that classical example of a toddler desperately trying to attack an adult who is just holding them off with one hand on their head while their arms flail wildly. Jordan spent that entire game effortlessly, deftly picking me apart and holding me at arm's length. It was a tour de force. He put on a clinic, and so the thought of playing him in round 2 of Novacore was obviously a little bit intimidating. That he was playing Yu Jing was interesting. I had actually been playing Yu Jing against his Aleph, but apparently it's an army that he's picked up, and this is what he did with it. So this is an example of what I mean when I said I expected the metagame at Novacore to be kind of hacking heavy. Again, as a note, I have reconstructed the list, but I can't guarantee the combat groups. This list does what I would call a really good job of being a Yu Jing version of Nomads, a Yu Jing hacking defense list. Obviously, where it does not have Morans, it has multiple deployable repeaters in the midfield, backed up with a very serviceable hacking network, including, in one case, that killer hacker Pheasant Imperial agent is duoed with the Firewall -6 Shang-Chi. So it is kind of a build-your-own high-value Trinity hacker. It also has the Daoying hacker Lieutenant, which I did not realize until I went to build this list is a 0 SWC hacker. I've actually been avoiding it in my Yu Jing lists because it pays more than usual to be a hacker. It costs 8 points more than the baseline +1 order Lieutenant, which is a lot for a hacking device. But being 0 SWC is one of the things that lets this list tick. So what is in this list? We have what we locally call the War Crimes package, which is a Celestial Guard monitor with 4 Guangxi. We have 1 Shaolin Monk, it's the cheapest version. We have a Guided Missile Remote, which obviously plays well into all of the hacking in this list. We have Attack-Aware APHMG Shang-Chi duoed with a Chain of Command Killer Hacker Device, Combi Rifle Emitter, Imperial Agent Pheasant rank. We have Crit Cockram and NCO, working well with the +1 order Lieutenant, with Heavy Shotgun Emitter Mines, Deployable Repeaters, and Mine Layer. In this game, he would actually place a Deployable Repeater with his Mine Layer skill. He's also an excellent specialist. We have a Mine Layer Guilang, who again in this scenario would place a Deployable Repeater. Guilangs are expensive because they have MSV1s, but the Mine Layer profile I especially like because it has a shotgun, and that kind of overcomes the bad ballistic skill that Guilangs have. Even if I will mostly be using it in template mode, which renders the MSV1 kind of useless, but hey. The Hacker Guilang I also like, which we have here in play. It's camouflaged, and it is whip 14. 30 points is expensive, but it can do good work. We have a Daoying hacker I mentioned before, we have a Rushi just as another gun, and then we have a Celestial Guard hacker, which is actually like whip 14, I believe, and BTS 3. You can do a lot worse for 18 points than that Celestial Guard. That is solid. So all in all, this list is really playing into the I'm going to be able to defend with hacking and with a ton of chain rifles. I will do some judicious gunfighting with my couple of decent gunfighting pieces, and I will accomplish objectives. I can see this list actually being good in almost all of the missions in Novacore, although including I would comfortably play this in countermeasures, for example. I might not play this in rescue purely because the 2 Guilangs and Cockram are a little restrained by the exclusion zone, but in almost every other case, including countermeasures, I like this list a lot. It has some interesting things to take away. It is not just playing the usual Yu Jing battle plan of the scenario is annihilation until I say otherwise. So I like it a lot. Against this, as noted, I chose to play my anathematic list, and the reason why actually was that I was expecting a Sujan and I was worried about losing the lieutenant role. This will be a recurring theme. I kind of realized mid-event that my anathematic list would end up being a good defensive option if I didn't win the LT role. And if I was going to face down a Sujan, I wanted to be able to potentially like hold it at bay with a combination of hacking arrows and hidden deployment pseudo-Noctifer plasma rifles. I wouldn't, as the case may be. In fact, I won the lieutenant role, but my fear of not going first put me in a position where I'm like, nope, I'm not going to run the big tag, I'm going to run the anathematic. And that decision was kind of reinforced by the table, which I'll show you now. So at first glance, this looks like a little bit of a mess in terms of like intimidating to play, but I actually found it to be one of the most playable tables that I played on over the course of the weekend. This is meant to be a kind of like Varuna facility table. I think the eventual goal, based on what the person who owns the table has told me, is that it's going to try and be kind of like a university facility in like a mangrove swamp, and it does capture that aesthetic, and I think it will do so even more once it gets like all of the kit together. A lot of this stuff had actually literally just arrived from the person who had made it for him in Sydney, which is kind of cool. As with the table that I played on in the first round, this table very helpfully included, and you can just about see it in corner of frame here, a laminated sheet with all of the rules for the table on it, which I discussed with my opponent and we only partially ignored. Now, in particular, what I'm getting at here is how we played this table. Much of it is kind of as you would expect. So like there's plenty of, there's walkways and there's, good solid corpus belli terrain, etc. There are these big sort of like mangrove tree stands, which the instructions on the sheet were to treat them as solid from the base up to the height of the tree, which worked quite well. Although I think if I was going to have a crack at adjusting this table, I would actually put like weeping willow strands coming down from these trees, because they do have the problem. Sometimes vegetation does this. If you have vegetation on a table, I quite like playing it as if it were solid. But when you have a narrow trunk and a wide canopy, it can be really hard for humans to visualize that. I think putting like willow strands or like vine or ivy strands to actually fill out that three-dimensional space would make it much easier. Now, neither me or Jordan struggled with actually remembering that, but a couple of times we did have the, oh no, hang on, there's no line of fire there. Right, cool. The only suggestion on how to play this map that we totally ignored was the suggestion that the blue water be played as aquatic difficult terrain. We had a very short chat about this and we both decided that we didn't want to, and I'm actually really glad that we did. Just as a general philosophical note, I quite like terrain at events if the event description says there will be terrain at this event. If you warn players that the tables will make more than normal use of difficult, mountainous, jungle, whatever terrain, you can let them know to adjust their builds accordingly. If you don't, and you have a table like this, and you play that as aquatic terrain, and one person is randomly playing Varuna and another person is randomly not, you introduce an imbalance to the game that it's like, oh, but Varuna models are all paying some points for their aquatic terrain. No, they're not. They're really not. Not in any meaningful sense. Terrain is an extremely cheap skill, sometimes costing nothing, that is included as flavor, and to have a massive game advantage accrue from that is, at least if you have not warned the players, probably not good. We played that water as it's just ground, and I'm actually really glad that we did, because it made the table actually wonderfully playable. In particular, the element that these pontoons and hills introduce is multiple layers of elevation that are easily accessible but still do interesting things with how you move. So these pontoons here are designed to be just about the height of a Silhouette 1. A Silhouette 1 model can vault onto and off them, hunky-dory, cool, the table is very accessible. But being just about the height of a Silhouette 1 is comfortably high enough that a prone model can look in behind them, which means that you have these like large areas of very accessible cover providing, line of fire blocking, but only sometimes. It's good. This worked well. You combine that with just the occasional bits of higher ground. You can see probably one of my favorite of the pontoons is this one here with the walkway up and around. This is really accessible. The stairwell like looks very nice, but you can obviously vault it from any height and a building on top. Along with like this rampart here, it just worked. It worked very nicely. I liked this table. The mangrove stands could probably be broken up a little bit. The hills need a coat of varnish because they were shedding. But I think that's because they were they had been made and then trucked in from Sydney. So overall, this was a very fun table to play on. The design premise is really cool. I look forward to seeing what the owner does with it over the course of his time with it, because I think this is actually a table that is in Canberra, or will be for the short haul. And then we have this building here, which is open interiors, and so Jordan and I did the logical thing, which was for neither of us to put anything on the rooftop, and then immediately remove the rooftop so it was playable. So we were playing supplies. I won the lieutenant role, and I elected to go first. The supply boxes were here, one in this building. There's actually some cover in this building as well, it's quite nice. And then one here. As I would with every game, I hidden deployed my anathematic, and I reserve dropped my Chironted lieutenant. So to quickly run through my deployment, we have Imatron here, an Imatron over here. Now, there's actually some space just behind this pontoon that it was in behind. It was on the table edge having failed its combat jump, but I was desperately afraid of it falling and going on the table. So it was just, I put it on the pontoon, but my opponent and I both know where it is. Same deal with the missile bot over here. We've got some flash pulse bots hanging out prone. We've got the biker here. This was a hard table to deploy a biker on, actually. She would never move. By the way, this is my biker. If you're wondering, yes, that is a large base with an Osnat and one of my Tega creatures on it. I don't care. I think it looks nice. It is a cool little biker. The other important sort of elements, most of it's just impetuous models being ready to impetuous if they want to. I have my HVT over here, and the important thing is that you can see this nook in between Bit and Kiss here. That's got an anathematic in it. For my opponent's part, he's deployed kind of in two strong points, here and here. So the Shang-Chi and Pheasant Rank are hanging out back here. The camouflage marker that is the Dao Ying and the Celestial Guard are hanging out back here. One camouflage marker will end up prone on this rooftop with a deployable repeater on these stairs. Another camouflage marker will come down here. So obviously I can tell that this is a Guilang mine layer. I don't at this point know what this Guilang is. If I'd been kind of like thinking about it, I might have guessed hacker, but I'm just like, okay, cool, it's a Guilang, I'll deal with that later. Crit Cockram would be, I think, the reserve, and he would come down here and put a deployable repeater there. For my part, my Chironted would reserve drop Boulder's Brass up onto this crate here, which unfortunately did not give him line of fire to this Guilang, but did give him as the first order line of fire to discover shoot that Guilang, which I'll take every day of the week. That's a very nice kill. That was a very aggressive deployment of my lieutenant, but I figured that based on what I could see, there wasn't something super heavy as an arrow piece coming, and if there was, I could always throw smoke with my impetuous orders. So it felt relatively safe, and that paid off. In terms of the defenses that Jordan had in place, lots of chain rifles, stuff hidden, not a lot of things in direct line of fire. It was a very nice null deployment with basically big repeater areas here and here, pinching off easy paths into the deployment zones. I could potentially have launched attacks sort of like up here or up here, but of course we now know that this is a Guilang, so that's also a hacker area, and in any case this attack route would be through that repeater there. So this was very nice. Like the midfield, the paths through the midfield were pretty much all, like this whole area was under either repeater or hacker area. For my part, I recognized that what I was playing against was something that kind of strongly resembled a nomad list, and so I put into plan my anti-nomad modus operandi, which is to eliminate leadership and hackers with extreme prejudice. So Bit and Kiss were the first heroes of this particular show, and this, I'm going to break this down move by move, but this was a savage first turn, to the point where actually, like, if this had been a non-tournament game, I would feel shit, because this was not fun for Jordan. And this is kind of the sort of strength of what this list going first can do. It was illuminating to play, but Jesus Christ. So Bit and Kiss, so first order is Lieutenant Order, which kills a Guilang. Good start. Bit and Kiss activate, and they move this direction. And I have to do this pretty carefully. They move once, and then they move again. Bit is going to come in this direction and hang out here. And Kiss moves here and then back to there. This takes Kiss through the repeater area, and he's going to get carbonated by the hacker down here. In fact, I think he also gets carbonated. Yes, the Dao Ying Lieutenant also reveals to pop 2 carbonites into him. I'm willing to accept this. There's a brief like Oblivion, don't Oblivion peripherals, by the way. Peripherals are not affected by Oblivion because they are not activated by orders. So it's Carbonite, Carbonite, and for my part, Kiss pops down 2 repeaters there, and Bit pops down 1 in this building. I managed to avoid walking into Jordan's repeater here, and all 4 repeaters land, which is lucky. I will have a game later where that does not happen, and it sucks, because there is no baggage in this list. But 2 repeaters and a repeater over here. The next thing so that's 2 orders spent. The next thing that happens is the Anathematic appears here and moves this direction, but then immediately reveals and surprise attacks. Now, my plan before the Dao Ying revealed to Carbonite Kiss was to kill the Celestial Guard hacker, then spotlight a Guangxi that is next to the camouflage marker, and then missile to kill them both. But the fact that the Dao Ying is a hacker means that instead I can reveal the Chirontid from surprise and split burst Trinity, 2 dice into each because I have burst 4 Trinity, and I just kill them both in one go. They try to Oblivion me, and if he'd rolled a crit here, or if I'd been tremendously unlucky, then things could have ended kind of badly in terms of this attack run. I would have fallen back on the Umbra Samaritan or maybe Bit to make these kills, but that didn't happen. I was 2 dice 19s, and he was 1 dice 8s, I think, on each of these attacks. So both of those hackers went down, the Celestial Guard and the Dao Ying. At this point, I had an interesting decision. The only other hacker that I could see was the Pheasant rank back here, duoed to the Tinbot Shangji. Technically speaking, there was some benefit to activating Kiss and trying to land a repeater down there, but there was no good practical line of fire without her walking into Jordan's deployable repeater. So instead, I just activated the Anathematic, and I moved into Jordan's repeater area. Normally, doing something like face-checking your opponent's repeater network is a bad idea. There are only a very small number of hackers that can risk kind of doing that, and the Anathematic is one of them. The best, in general terms, is an Asura in OSS with an Evo hacker behind her, and the reason why I say the best, she's actually very close to the Anathematic. She has lower whip and a lower burst Trinity, but she has +2 damage on her Trinity, which means punching through firewalls is easier, and it is way easier for OSS to have an Evo hacker. They're already taking the Takini remote link, which means that the Evo hacker is right there doing good duty if you don't need a firewall, but if you intend to like walk into an enemy Moran and start fighting interventors, then the Evo hacker can put up Fairy Dust heavy infantry to give the Asura her own firewall. I didn't have that capability in this list, but the Anathematic was still a beast. It walks into a zone of control of Jordan's repeater, and at this point, in an attempt to fork his ARO, he responds with Trinity on the Pheasant rank, and he reveals this Guilang with Oblivion. I ignore the Trinity, it can't kill me, and I put all 4 burst into the Guilang. Obviously, I'm fighting to an enemy repeater, but that is still 4 dice on 16 versus 1 dice on 14s. I delete the Guilang, I shrug the hit from a Trinity, and then I activate again, and I put 4 dice. This is a -6 Tinbot protecting the Pheasant rank. It doesn't matter. I put 4 dice on 13s into it. It responds with 1 dice on... It's responding 1 dice on 16s, I think. I just overwhelm it. Overwhelm it, kill it, and then I pick up a box and I move backwards. And this is kind of an example of just how violently powerful the Anathematic can be as a hacker, and indeed overwhelmingly the kills that it would score this event would be hacking kills. I've picked up 1 box, and Jordan is in a horrific state. He has lost 5 models, all of which are regular order generators and which are very expensive, which include his lieutenant and his chain of command Pheasant. And he kind of made the comment that he sort of thought his hacking defense would hold a bit longer. And I think that's a very reasonable comment. There are almost no hackers in the game that can just overpower in this situation like the Anathematic can, and it sucks. Basically, it sucks that he had to play into it because I think his battle plan was a really good one. But at this point, the game is functionally all over by the shouting. He's in loss of lieutenant, he moves things up as best he can, tactical awareness with the Shang-Chi HMG, etc. But I lose nothing. My stuff is pulled back and hidden, the Chirontid HMG is clamped down. Moving crit forward moves it into my repeater area, and he gets isolated and spotlit. He gets missile killed the next turn, etc. It's just a mess. I move a Tiger creature forward to pick the box up off the anathematic, and it runs back to my deployment zone. Basically, this is my last turn. My second turn is my last, and there's very little that needs to be killed. I move the... So, Tiger creature grabs the box off the anathematic and runs away. Umbra Samaritan moves across here, picks up this box, and then hides behind this platform. And then the anathematic moves through here, and picks up this box. So I'm holding all three. The anathematic on its way through plasma rifles a Shaolin monk and plasma rifles the Shang-Chi. Fairly easy kills on both. Crit has died to a missile launcher. We do the quick check in Jordan's turn, and he's in retreat. There's nothing he has that can kill any of the things holding my boxes, even if he had the orders to get to me. There are some, Quangxi run forward, but a couple of them have died already. The Rushi isn't in position. And I'm the only... Basically, I scored 9 points in this scenario, and the reason is I actually kind of forgot to secure the HVT. I didn't have a classified that I could do, I don't think. But there's nothing that Jordan can do. It's just the damage has been... That damage on the first turn, functionally, was too strong. So, I am glad that I had this game in the sense that I got to see the high watermark of my plan to dominate the hacking game. The pithy line is that there is a finite amount of fun to be had with hacking in any individual game of Infinity, and I intended to have all of it. And it was successful, but this game was enough to convince me to probably not play this list down the shop that often. Maybe that's not necessarily the take that I need to make, because Novacore had a really heavy hacking meta. Most tournaments won't do that. For example, Burn City Brawl is coming up in Melbourne in a few months, and it's got a much more open set of scenarios. They're still complex scenarios that you need to play, but they don't hold you by the shirt front and say, you will take hackers to do these. So maybe I'm overstating the effect, but this game was a real showcase in what a true alpha hacker can do to a game, in a game against an opponent that just has kind of a normal and sensible hacking defense. So that ends the round. I score a 9-point major victory, which means I'm currently undefeated on 2 majors, and you'll see me again soon in round 3.